There's been an absence of any attempt to resolve the war diplomatically, which is what you would be doing, trying to solve it diplomatically if you actually cared about the Ukrainians. The Biden administration instead has been escalating the war seemingly deliberately, which is what you would do if you don't care about Ukrainians, but instead care about weapons manufacturers and the power of the U.S. security state.
In the mainstream media, there's really only been a few voices of reason when it comes to the war in Ukraine. The main one we've cited on the channel here has been Tucker Carlson. He's had on guests such as Colonel Douglas McGregor, someone who we've had on the show, Glenn Greenwald, someone who we've also had on the show, and I believe even had Aaron Maté on at the Gray Zone, who has been on this show many times. He's been doing an incredible job breaking down the lunacy of Western support and the Western creation of this current crisis in Ukraine. But another person who's actually been doing pretty stellar coverage of this and other crazy oligarchical ambitions and aims and actions of the Biden administration recently that I've been checking out has been Laura Ingraham. Laura Ingraham just had on Glenn Greenwald to talk about the state of the war in Ukraine, and I think it's a great video that I'd like to share with all of you, because it's one thing for me to share stories from you that expose the Western media lies, but it's a whole nother thing to be able to share with a new audience that even the Western press is beginning to admit that the war in Ukraine is not what it was made out to be. Take a look. Let's break it down.
The war in Ukraine reaches its 100th day, if you can believe it. We thought it was important to take stock of where we are. Christopher Caldwell, a contributing editor at the Claremont Review of Books, wrote a stunning guest essay in the New York Times arguing that the conflict is spiraling out of control and how U.S. policymaking has contributed to that. He writes, even if we don't accept Mr. Putin's claim that America's arming of Ukraine is the reason the war happened in the first place, it is certainly the reason the war has taken the kinetic, explosive, deadly form it has. Our role in this is not passive or incidental. We've given Ukrainians cause to believe they can prevail in a war of escalation. That naturally may create among American policymakers a sense of moral and political obligation to stay the course, to escalate the conflict, to match any excess. Well, given that level-headed warning, this headline in The Hill caught our eye. 36 experts agree, stay the course in Ukraine. Now, the signatures naturally include a panoply of MSNBC and CNN green room fixtures, but we couldn't help but get the sense that we've heard this language before.
And when she says CNN and MSNBC green room fixtures or whatever she said, what that really translates to is national security operatives, right? Deep state operatives. Because if you look at who these outlets like CNN and MSNBC regularly bring on their shows or even employ, it is mostly people who have lied up and up and up in their careers to get higher and higher job positions up until the point where they're given these 7-figure salaries at outlets such as CNN and MSNBC. And they're career deep state operatives, right? They're from the national security state, and all they do is lie on behalf of, their agencies and their organizations and their bureaucratic institutions, right? They represent the permanent class of DC elites that really do control what goes on the global stage and domestically, of course. And they face no elections. They're there from presidential administration to presidential administration, regardless of party switches. So that is who she is referring to.
We are doing the right thing, and we must stay the course.
My message today to those in Iraq is we'll stay the course.
So are the many billions in weaponry that we're sending to Ukraine, are they really about ensuring a victory for Ukraine?
No.
Or is it just needlessly extending the bloodshed as part of some elite vanity project from a foreign policy establishment that's been wrong on most everything during the last 2 decades?
And it's not even just about that, as we discuss here quite a bit. What all these Western states are doing are dumping their old Soviet-made weapons or their old weapons into Ukraine so they can just buy new ones from the arms industry, and then the arms industry will subsequently line their pockets with campaign cash in the next election cycle. That's all that's happening.
Joining me now is Glenn Greenwald, co-founder of The Intercept and author of Securing Democracy. Glenn, how many times have we heard this stay the course, victories around the corner, we got them on the run, let's surge and do, pick your city or town. Are you surprised by this at this point?
Every time I've been on your show to talk about this war from the start, the theme has always been the one question that's most important happens to be the one never being asked, which is, in what way does this war serve the interests of the American people? It doesn't. Obviously, it serves the interest of a tiny sliver of people in Washington, weapons manufacturers, people in the security state who get money and power from these sorts of things. And right at the moment when their market for these weapons disappeared, when the U.S. finally got out of Iraq and Afghanistan, lo and behold, there's this new market in Ukraine. And I think the op-ed really reflects the fact of how suppressed the debate has been, because it points to things like, we've been in Ukraine since 2014. We've been arming them since at least 2017 or 2018 with heavy weaponry, making very provocative gestures toward Russia right on the other side of the border. And there's been an absence of any attempt to resolve the war diplomatically, which is what you would be doing, trying to solve it diplomatically if you actually cared about the Ukrainians. The Biden administration instead has been escalating the war seemingly deliberately, which is what you would do if you don't care about Ukrainians, but instead care about weapons manufacturers and the power of the U.S. security state.
Joe Biden, Glenn, is basically just a non-answer on what he believes needs to happen next. Watch.
Mr. President, does Ukraine have to cede territory to achieve some peace?
It's their territory. I'm not going to tell them what they should and shouldn't do. But it appears to me that at some point along the line, there's a settlement here. And what that entails, I don't know. But in the meantime, we're going to continue to put the Ukrainians in a position where they can defend themselves.
So he's basically forcing the Ukrainians to fight this war on behalf of the West, mainly Western Europe, knowing full well that they're going to suffer thousands upon tens of thousands of casualties, lose land, eventually likely have to cede territory. All for what? So Joe Biden can dump off some old weapons there and get some new ones from his buddies at Raytheon? Seems like it, yeah.
Glenn, Germany and France have already, just a few days ago, urged Russia to go back to the negotiating table. They want this over, clearly. It's killing their economies. And Biden's still meandering down this road of, well, we're going to keep sending more weapons there. What's your response to this?
So I think there's been a clear narrative shift in how the media has been describing this war over the last couple of weeks. That's quite notable. For the first 3 months, the media has barely acknowledged Russian advances at all. If you were listening to them, you would think that the Ukrainians have vanquished this much more powerful Russian military. Many times the experts said they were days away from a full-scale military collapse. And now the media is acknowledging that they have essentially consolidated control over large portions of eastern Ukraine, which is what Putin said from the beginning was his goal. So in order to actually expel the Russians from Ukrainian territory and go back to the pre-invasion borders, you would need a commitment over many years that would be extremely dangerous and very expensive. We can't win a war on the other side of the world without a sacrifice well beyond what Americans are or should be willing to endure.
Glenn, you called this from the beginning, and sadly, you were right. But we really appreciate your perspective tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Good to be with you.
So that's just the truth. I mean, even in the first initial days of this war, when we had on Colonel Douglas McGregor on this show right here, he made a pretty obvious statement. He said, look, expecting the U.S. to win a proxy war against Russia in Ukraine on their border would be tantamount of expecting that Russia would win a proxy war against the U.S. On the U.S.-Mexico border against, Russian proxies in Mexico. It's just not going to happen. There's no way it's going to happen, and it's going to go poorly for them, Then you take into account all of the economic isolationist policies that the Biden administration has pursued and has pressured the EU to pursue. And this whole thing is imploding in their face now. And that's why we're beginning to see now a Zelensky curse. I heard the Duran dub it as such, and I think we should roll with that. We're beginning to see the breakdown of governments who have been pursuing all of these insane agendas, right? Supporting Ukraine, dumping billions of arms into their country, pursuing these isolationist economic policies, right? We see Estonia breaking down. We see the UK, Boris Johnson barely surviving a no confidence vote. He's in his last days. We see Joe Biden surely in a very desperate state right now. And if an impeachment trial comes in the Congress when the Republicans take the Congress in 2022, I mean, it's only going to go even further downhill. This is the Zelensky curse, as we're calling it. We're seeing the German German leadership is in decay right now. It's not going well for any of these countries, and as long as they continue to push it on, it is only going to get worse. Thanks for watching that episode of The Dive. If you'd like to support independent journalism, be sure to subscribe and consider becoming a member on my Patreon using the link below.